The enemy commander walked out into the open, grabbed a wounded American Marine by the collar, dragged him across the dirt where all 8 trapped SEALs could see, and pressed a pistol to the back of the young man's skull, screaming into the valley, "Watch your brother die, and then I will come for the rest of you." He wanted them to see it. He wanted them broken before he finished them. And in that frozen second, when every SEAL believed the worst was already here, a single rifle shot cracked from somewhere in the distant hills, and the commander dropped where he stood, the pistol falling into the dust an inch from a man he would never get to kill. Before we go on, if stories about courage, sacrifice, and ordinary people doing impossible things move you the way they move me, take one second and subscribe to this channel and follow this story all the way to the end, because what happens next will stay with you. And do me one small favor. Tell me in the comments what city you are watching from right now, so I can see just how far this story travels around the world. Now let's begin. The valley had a name that none of the SEALs could pronounce, and by the time the sun would rise over it, most of them believed they would be dead inside it. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Mitchell pressed his shoulder blades flat against a crumbling concrete wall and tried to remember how many men he still had breathing. He counted in his head the way you count when your hands are shaking and you don't trust your own eyes. Miller, Kowalski, Reyes, Vance, Delgado, Torres, Hayes, and himself. 8. He had walked into this valley with 8. And if the ledger held, he still had 8, but 3 of them were leaking blood into the dirt, and the math of a firefight was cruel. 8 now did not mean 8 in 10 minutes. "Boss," Petty Officer Torres shouted over the noise, "we can't stay here. They're walking rounds right through the wall." "I know. They're going to collapse this whole side of the building on top of us." "I know, Torres." Ryan didn't have a better answer, and that was the thing that terrified him more than the bullets. He was the officer. He was the one they were supposed to look at when the world fell apart, and right now the world was falling apart, and he had nothing. The mission had been clean. That was the part he kept circling back to, even as the rooftops around him spat fire. It had been clean. They had come in quiet, moved through the village like ghosts, reached the compound where the intelligence said the target was sleeping, and they had done everything the way the book said to do it. Get in, grab the man, get out. Simple. The kind of thing this team had done a dozen times before without a scratch. The capture had gone perfectly. The terrorist commander they had come for was zip-tied and face down in the dust behind them alive, exactly as ordered. Everything up to that moment had gone exactly as planned. It was the walkout that killed men. Contact left, rooftop. Kowalski's rifle barked, and a shape on the eastern roofline slumped forward. But for every fighter that fell, there seemed to be 3 more that took his place, rising up out of buildings that were supposed to be empty, out of alleys that were supposed to be clear, out of the hills that were supposed to be watched. That was the word that kept clawing at the back of Ryan's mind. Watched. Someone was supposed to be watching the hills. They had put a set of eyes up on the high ground precisely so this would not happen, precisely so that if the enemy tried to close in from the ridgelines, they would get a warning, a voice in the ear, a shot from above, and the eyes had gone silent almost the moment the shooting started. "Overwatch, this is Mitchell. Do you copy?" Ryan pressed a finger to his ear and shouted into the radio. "Overwatch, come in. Anybody up top, come in." Static. Come on, talk to me." Nothing but the hiss of dead air and the pounding of guns. Chief Petty Officer Miller crawled up beside him, dragging his right leg, his pant leg, dark and shining. "Ryan," he said, and the fact that he used the first name instead of the rank told Ryan everything he needed to know about how bad Miller thought this was. "Ryan, our Overwatch is gone. Either they got pushed off the mountain or they got killed on it. Either way, we're blind up top and we're pinned down here. Nobody's watching our backs." Extraction. "Where's our bird?" 25 minutes. Ryan closed his eyes for 1 second. Just one. "We don't have 25 minutes. "No," Miller said quietly, "we don't." Out beyond the wall, past the wrecked cars and the shattered mud brick homes, the enemy was doing something worse than shooting. They were talking. Ryan could hear them calling to one another in the dark, their voices rising and falling, with something that sounded almost like laughter, the way men sound when they already know how a thing is going to end, and they are in no hurry to finish it. They were taking their time. They were closing the ring one careful step at a time, the way a man walks up on an animal he has already trapped. How many? Ryan asked. Give me a real count. Reyes was pressed up against the corner with the optic on his rifle doing the ugly work of counting the men who wanted them dead. Best I can tell, 30, he said. Maybe more. Machine gun teams on 2 roofs. I got an RPG crew setting up in that building at your 2 o'clock. And I count at least 2 shooters up in the hills that are taking careful shots, not spray. Those are the ones that scare me, boss. Those are shooters. 30 against 8. 3 of them wounded, ammunition running low, a helicopter 25 minutes out that might as well have been on the moon. All units, Ryan finally said into the radio, forcing his voice to stay level because a scared voice spreads faster than a bullet. All units, we are pinned down. Multiple casualties. Enemy has complete control of our movement. We are going to hold this compound, and we are going to wait for the bird. Nobody does anything stupid. Nobody tries to be a hero. We hold and we live. Copy. One by one, the voices came back. Copy. Copy, boss. Copy. And in the small pause between those voices, Ryan let himself feel the thing he could not say out loud. He did not believe it. He told his men to hold, and they would live, and he did not believe a word of it, and he suspected that some of them didn't either. And they said copy anyway because that is what men do for each other in a place like that. Then the enemy commander walked out into the open. Ryan saw him through a gap in the rubble, a tall man in a dark coat walking upright through the middle of a firefight like the bullets did not apply to him. And Ryan understood in an instant that this was the man running the whole thing. He walked like he owned the valley. He walked to the far edge of the compound where one of the wounded had been dragged during the first chaos of the ambush. A young support Marine named Cole, who had been attached to the team for the operation, barely 22 years old. And the commander reached down and took a fistful of the boy's collar and hauled him up onto his knees in full view of everyone. No, Miller breathed. No, no, no. He's putting on a show, Reyes said, and his voice had gone flat and cold. Boss, he's making an example. He wants us to watch. The commander pressed a pistol to the back of the boy's head and shouted something across the valley in a voice loud enough to carry over the guns. And even though most of the SEALs could not understand the words, they understood the meaning perfectly, because cruelty has a language all its own. Watch this. Watch your brother die, and then I am coming for the rest of you. I can't get a shot, Kowalski hissed, shifting his rifle. I got a hostage in the way. I move an inch, and I hit the kid. Nobody fire, Ryan snapped. Nobody fire, you'll hit Cole. Boss, he's gonna kill him anyway. I said nobody fire. The young Marine was crying. They could all see it. His shoulders were shaking, and his lips were moving, and later when the ones who survived tried to describe that moment, none of them could agree on what he was saying, whether it was a prayer or a name or just the word no repeated over and over. But every one of them agreed on this. He looked toward the wall where his brothers were hiding. In the last second of what he believed was his life, the kid turned his head and looked toward the men who could not save him, and the look on his face was not anger. It was apology, as if he were sorry to make them watch. And the commander smiled. In the middle of all that killing, the man actually smiled, and he tightened his grip on the pistol. That was the moment. A single rifle shot cracked out of the distant hills, a clean, flat sound that did not belong to any of the weapons in that valley, and the commander's smile came apart, and he folded straight down into the dirt, and the pistol fell out of his hand and landed an inch from the young Marine's knee, and the boy who was supposed to die was suddenly kneeling there alive, staring at the body of the man who had been about to kill him. For one full heartbeat, nobody moved. Not the SEALs, not the enemy. It was as if the entire valley had stopped breathing at once. What? Torres said. What just happened? Somebody, Miller whispered. Somebody just took that shot. Ryan stared through the gap in the rubble, and he could not make sense of what his eyes were telling him. The most dangerous man on that battlefield, the man orchestrating their deaths, was lying dead in the dirt, and none of Ryan's men had fired. He knew his people. He knew their positions. He knew where every rifle on his team was pointed, and not one of them could have made that shot from that angle. It had come from somewhere far up in the hills, from the high ground, from the exact place their overwatch had gone silent. Cole, Ryan barked. Komu, get to cover now. Crawl, crawl to me. The young Marine snapped out of his shock, threw himself flat, and began dragging himself across the open ground toward the wall, while the enemy, still stunned, was slow to react. Reyes and Torres laid down fire to cover him, and the kid clawed his way into the compound and collapsed against the concrete beside Miller, gasping alive, shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. "You're okay," Miller told him, gripping the back of his neck. "You hear me? You're okay. You're with us." "Who?" Cole managed to say. "Who shot him? Who?" "I don't know," Ryan said. "I don't know." And then the second shot came. Up on the eastern roof line, the enemy machine gun that had been chewing their compound to pieces since the ambush began. The one weapon that more than any other had them pinned down and unable to move went suddenly silent. Not jammed, not out of ammunition. The gunner behind it simply pitched sideways and did not get back up, and the barrel that had been raining fire down on the SEALs swung uselessly toward the sky. "That gun's down," Kowalski said, disbelief creeping into his voice. "Boss, the machine gun's down. Somebody dropped the gunner." "Same shooter," Reyes said. He had his optic up, and he was scanning the hills, hunting for the source. "That's the same shooter, has to be. That's 2 impossible shots in 10 seconds. A third shot. The RPG crew in the building at Ryan's, 2 o'clock, the one Reyes had spotted, setting up the one that could have collapsed the entire wall the SEALs were hiding behind and ended all of them in a single blast, never got to fire. The man kneeling with the launcher on his shoulder slumped forward, and the rocket he never got to send off tipped harmlessly out of the tube and clattered onto the floor of the ruined building. "That's 3, Miller said. He was starting to laugh, a strange, cracked, half-hysterical laugh. The laugh of a man who thought he was going to die and just found out maybe he wasn't. "That's 3, Ryan. 3 of their worst threats, gone 1, 2, 3 like that." "Everybody hold," Ryan ordered. "Do not expose yourself. Whoever's up there is doing more damage in a minute than we did in 20. Let them work. Reyes, find them. I want to know who's shooting." "Working on it, boss. But whoever it is, they're good. They're picking targets in order of how much they can hurt us. The commander, then the machine gun, then the RPG. That's not luck. That's a professional making a decision about which one of us they're going to save first." Out in the valley, the enemy was starting to understand. Their laughter had stopped. The confident calling back and forth had turned into shouting hard and fast, and angry men trying to figure out where the fire was coming from, men looking up at the hills that a moment ago had belonged entirely to them. Because that was the thing that had just changed, the high ground. For the entire fight, the enemy had owned the high ground, and the SEALs down in the compound had been fighting up at them, exposed, trapped at the mercy of anyone above them. And now, somewhere up in that same high ground, something had turned. Someone up there was not on the enemy's side. Someone up there was hunting. "Overwatch." Ryan tried the radio again, hope leaping into his chest for the first time since the ambush began. "Overwatch, if that's you up there, if you can hear me, key your mic, tell me you're alive." Nothing. "Come on, talk to me. Whoever you are, talk to me." Nothing but static and the crack of another rifle shot rolling down from the hills and another enemy fighter falling somewhere out in the dark. "They're not answering," Miller said. "Maybe they can't," Ryan said. "Maybe they're too busy keeping us alive to talk." The next 20 minutes would decide everything, and Ryan knew it. The bird was still coming, but a helicopter needs a place to land. And right now, the landing zone at the near edge of the village was a killing ground swept by enemy fire. It didn't matter how many threats the mystery shooter took down, if the enemy still controlled that patch of ground when the helicopter tried to touch down. A bird coming in low and slow into hostile fire was the easiest target in the world. One RPG, one heavy machine gun, and they would lose the aircraft and everyone on it, and there would be no second bird tonight. "Reyes, I need eyes on the LZ, Ryan said. "Tell me what's holding them." "Bad news, boss. They still got a strong point at the near edge of the village, right where the birds got to come in. Looks like a heavy gun, and maybe 6, 7 fighters dug in behind a wall. Our shooter up in the hills can't see that position. It's on the wrong side of a building. There's no angle from the ridge." Ryan's stomach dropped. So it wasn't going to be that simple. Whoever was up in the hills was a miracle, but a miracle with limits. There were still threats that no one on the high ground could touch. There were still men down here in this compound who were going to have to do the ugly, close work of clearing a landing zone by hand in the dark, low on ammunition with 3 wounded men who couldn't run. "Okay," he said, and something in his voice steadied the way it does in a man when he finally stops hoping for rescue and starts making a plan to save himself. "Okay, here's how it goes. Our friend up top keeps the roofs and the hills off our backs. We use that. We move on the strong point at the LZ ourselves. We clear it, we hold it, and we get our wounded on that bird. Torres, Kowalski, Reyes, you're with me on the assault. Miller, you can barely walk, so you and Delgado and Hayes hold here with the wounded and cover our push. Everybody clear. Clear, they answered one after another. Cole, Ryan said, turning to the young Marine who was still shaking against the wall. Can you shoot? The kid looked up at him. He had been an inch from a bullet in the back of the skull less than a minute ago, and his hands were still trembling, but he wiped his face with the back of his wrist and he nodded. I can shoot, sir. Then you're on the wall with Miller. You watch our backs. You do that, you hear me. Somebody up in those hills decided you were worth saving tonight. You make sure that was a good decision. Yes, sir. Up on the ridge, the rifle spoke again. And again, and each time it spoke, an enemy fighter who had been moving to flank the compound stopped moving. Ryan could feel the balance of the fight shifting under his feet, could feel the enemy's certainty draining away, and something like fear taking its place. And he seized on it the way a drowning man seizes a rope because he understood that this window would not stay open. Whoever was up there was buying them a chance with every trigger pull, and that chance had to be spent now. Right now, before the enemy figured out that the fire from the hills came from one rifle and one rifle only and turned to hunt it down. On my go, Ryan said. We move fast, we move low, and we do not stop until we own that strong point. Anybody who freezes gets us all killed. Ready? Ready. Ready, boss. Ready. Go. They came over the wall like men who had decided to live, and for the first time all night, they were the ones moving forward instead of the ones cowering behind cover. They crossed the open ground in short, brutal rushes, one man up and firing, while another moved the way they had trained 1,000 times, and above them, unseen, the rifle in the hills covered the paths. They could not cover themselves, dropping a fighter who leaned out of a window to fire on them, silencing a shooter who tried to catch them in the open. He's got us, Torres shouted as they moved. Whoever it is, they're watching us, boss. They're clearing our path as we go. I know. Keep moving. Don't waste it. They reached the last building before the strong point, and there they hit a wall of fire that no shooter in the hills could help them with, because now they were down in the streets in the close and filthy work, and the enemy at the landing zone knew exactly what the Americans were trying to do and had every intention of stopping them. Heavy gun 12 o'clock, Kowalski yelled, ducking back as a stream of fire tore chunks out of the corner they were hiding behind. That's the one that'll kill the bird. We take that gun, or we don't get out of here. Reyes frag, Ryan ordered. Torres on my signal, you and me flank right. Kowalski, you keep that gunner's head down. We do this fast, and we do it now that bird is 4 minutes out. 4 minutes. The whole night, everything they had bled for had come down to 4 minutes in a heavy machine gun and a handful of men who wanted them dead. Grenades cooking, Reyes said. Throw it. The explosion rocked the strong point, and in the ringing half-second that followed, Ryan and Torres came around the right side low and fast, and the close fight became the kind of thing that does not photograph well and does not make it into the clean official reports a matter of a few feet in a few seconds, in the willingness to keep pulling a trigger when everything in your body is screaming at you to stop. When it was over, the heavy gun was silent, the strong point was theirs, and Ryan was down on one knee in the wreckage, with his chest heaving, staring at the empty patch of ground where a helicopter was about to land. LZ is clear, he said into the radio, and he had to say it twice because the first time his voice broke. LZ is clear, we hold the landing zone, bring the bird in. Copy, we have your position, 2 minutes out, came the voice of the pilot, calm and steady, and the most beautiful sound Ryan had heard in his life. Miller, Ryan called back toward the compound. Miller, start moving the wounded. We own the LZ. Get them up. Get them ready. Moving them now, boss, Miller answered. Cole's carrying one kid stronger than he looks. And through all of it, the rifle in the hills never stopped. Every time an enemy fighter tried to regroup, tried to move on the exposed SEALs as they carried their wounded across open ground, a shot rolled down from the high ground and put a stop to it. Ryan had lost count of how many the mystery shooter had taken. 10, 12, more. Enough that the enemy force that had numbered 30 and had them dead to rights was now scattered, leaderless and afraid. And the thing that had scattered them was not the SEALs at all. It was one rifle up on a ridge refusing to quit. Boss, Reyes said quietly, coming up beside him as they waited for the helicopter, both of them watching the hills. Whoever that is up there, they saved every single one of us tonight. You know that. I know it. The commander was going to execute that kid. And then he was going to do the rest of us one at a time and film it probably. And this whole thing turned on one shot from a mile away in the dark. I know, Reyes. So who is it? Who's up there? Ryan didn't answer because he didn't have an answer, and because the truth was that the question was starting to gnaw at him in a way he couldn't shake. The Overwatch element assigned to this mission had been one sniper and one spotter. Two people. And the last anyone had heard from them was a garbled transmission early in the ambush, a call that had cut off in the middle, a voice reporting that they were taking fire and that one of them was hit. After that silence, everyone in the command had written the Overwatch element off. Everyone had assumed they were gone, either killed or driven off the mountain, which was exactly why the SEALs had felt so utterly alone when the trap closed around them. But somebody was up on that mountain. Somebody was up there right now, alone, out of contact with the enemy, surely hunting them by now. And that somebody had spent the last 20 minutes methodically saving the lives of 8 men they had never met, one careful shot at a time. Reyes, Ryan said slowly. The Overwatch element. The one we all thought was dead. Who was it? Who did they put up there? Reyes thought about it. I don't know exactly, boss. Army sniper team on loan for the op. I heard a name at the briefing, but I wasn't paying attention. I figured they were just gonna be a voice in our ear the whole time. He paused. Why? Because whoever that is up in the hills isn't a voice in our ear, Ryan said. They're not talking to us at all. They're not calling for support. They're not asking for permission. They're just up there alone in the dark, killing everything that tries to kill us, and they haven't said one word. You think it's the Overwatch? I think Ryan said that the person everybody wrote off as dead is the only reason any of us are going home. The helicopter came in loud and low, kicking up a storm of dust, and the SEALs moved with the desperate efficiency of men who could see the finish line loading the wounded, first Cole staggering up the ramp with a man across his shoulders, Miller limping behind him, Torres and Kowalski laying down fire toward the last of the scattered enemy as their brothers climbed aboard. Ryan was the last man up the way, an officer is supposed to be, and just before he turned aboard, he stopped, and he looked back one final time toward the black shape of the hills where a rifle had spoken for the last several minutes. Overwatch, he said into his radio one more time, not expecting an answer, just needing to say it. I don't know who you are, but you saved us. Every one of us. Whoever you are up there, you saved us, and I am not leaving this country until I know your name. Do you copy? Do you copy? For a long moment, there was only static. And then faint and cracked and clearly exhausted, a single word came through the radio. The first and only word the mystery shooter had spoken all night, spoken in a voice that stopped Ryan Mitchell cold, a voice that was not what he expected. Not what any of them expected, a voice that turned everything they thought they understood about that night on its head. Go, just that, one word. Go. Say again, Overwatch, Ryan shouted over the roar of the rotors. Say again, are you hit? Are you mobile? We can send the bird back for you, say again. Go, the voice repeated steadier now, and there was something underneath it, something that sounded almost like a person who had made peace with being left behind so that others could live. I've still got runners down here. If the bird stays, they'll bring it down. Get your wounded out. I'll move on foot. Go. That's not how this works, Ryan said. We don't leave people. You hear me. We do not leave people. Then you understand me perfectly, the voice answered, because neither do I. Now go, Commander. That's why I'm still up here. Go. And the pilot was pulling pitch, and the helicopter was rising, and the ground was falling away. And Ryan Mitchell stood on the ramp gripping a strap with white knuckles, staring down at the black hills, where a lone shooter was choosing to stay behind in enemy territory rather than risk a helicopter full of wounded men. And he realized in that instant that he did not even know if the person who had just saved his entire team would live to see the sunrise. Inside the shaking cabin, his men were staring at him, all of them, even the wounded, because they had all heard that voice come through the radio, and they had all heard the same impossible thing in it that he had. Boss, Torres said, and he could barely get the words out. Boss, that voice, that was. Yeah, Ryan said, that was a woman. Nobody said anything for a moment. The helicopter climbed and banked, and the valley that had almost become their grave shrank away beneath them. And 8 men who should have been dead sat in stunned silence with a truth none of them had been ready for. The person who had turned the entire battle. The shooter who had killed the enemy commander silenced the machine guns, stopped the rockets, and hunted a force of 30 fighters through the dark until it broke and scattered. The one who had chosen to stay behind alone, so a helicopter full of wounded strangers could escape. It had not been a squad. It had not been an aircraft. It had not been the second SEAL team that command kept promising and never sent. It had been one soldier, one rifle, one woman up in the hills whom every single person in the chain of command had already crossed off as dead, and who had never once in the darkest hours of that night considered leaving them to die. "We have to go back for her," Cole said suddenly. The young Marine who had been on his knees with a pistol to his skull an hour ago sat up straight against the bulkhead, his eyes wide and fierce. "Sir, whoever she is, she saved my life. She saved all of us. We can't just leave her down there. Please, sir. We have to go back." Ryan Mitchell looked at the boy, and then he looked out the open door at the mountains sliding past below, dark and vast and full of men, who by now knew exactly where their sniper was and who would spend the rest of the night hunting her across that unforgiving ground. "We're going back," Ryan said, and he said it like a vow, like a debt, like the only thing in the world that mattered anymore. "The second we drop the wounded, the second we rearm, we are turning this bird around and we are going off into that valley, and we are not leaving Afghanistan without hero. I don't care what command says. I don't care what the risk is. She stayed for us." He gripped the strap tighter and stared down into the dark. "So we go back for her." 2 hours before Ryan Mitchell made that vow on the ramp of a rising helicopter, before the enemy commander ever walked out into the open with a pistol in his hand, Staff Sergeant Emily Carter had been lying flat on her belly on a slab of cold rock a full kilometer above the valley, watching the whole disaster unfold through her scope and screaming inside her own head at men who could not hear her. "Turn around," she whispered, as if the SEALs down below could somehow catch the words on the wind. "Don't go through the valley, please. Don't go through the valley, Watting." But they went through the valley. Emily had seen it before they had. That was the cruelty of her position. From up on the high ground with the whole battlefield laid out beneath her like a map, she could see the shapes moving on the rooftops that the men on the ground could not, could see the fighters filtering silently into the buildings on both sides of the narrow pass, could see the trap closing its jaws a full minute before anyone walked into it. She had grabbed her radio and she had called it in her voice, tight and urgent. "Ground element, this is Overwatch. Hold your movement. I have multiple armed personnel moving into position on both sides of your route. This is an ambush. I say again, this is an ambush. Do not enter the valley." And the answer had come back garbled, broken, half swallowed by the terrain and the distance and the failing equipment. She would never know for certain whether they heard her. She would carry that not knowing for the rest of her life. Maybe the message got through and it was too late to stop. Maybe it never reached them at all. All she knew was that the SEAL team kept moving, walked straight into the closing trap, and the valley erupted. "Talk to me, Danny," she had said, not lifting her eye from the scope. "What are you seeing on the east side?" Sergeant Daniel Brooks, her spotter, the man who had been her second set of eyes for 2 years and her friend for longer, was lying beside her with his own optics up. "I count machine gun teams on 2 roofs," Brooks said. "RPGs setting up in the buildings. And I'm seeing shooters moving up into the hills. They're not just hitting the SEALs. They're spreading out. Somebody planned this. They knew we'd have Overwatch," Emily said. "They're coming for us, too." "Yeah, they are." That was when the enemy sniper found them. Emily didn't hear the shot that hit Brooks. That was the thing about being on the wrong end of a good shooter. You never heard the one that mattered. 1 second, Brooks was talking, calm and steady, calling out enemy positions, and the next second, he made a sound she had never heard him make in all the years she'd known him, a short, sharp grunt, and his optics dropped from his hands and clattered against the rock. "Danny," she said. "Danny." "I'm hit," Brooks said, and his voice was thin. "Shoulder? Hi, I'm hit M." "Where's the shooter? Where'd it come from?" "I don't know. Ridge across the valley, maybe? I don't know." Emily rolled and grabbed him and dragged him back behind the rock, and her hands came away dark, and she understood in an instant that everything about this night had just changed. Her spotter was down. Her second rifle was gone. Her second set of eyes, the eyes that kept her alive while she worked, the eyes that watched her flanks so she could stay buried in her scope, were now the eyes of a man bleeding out on a mountainside who needed her to keep him alive. Okay, she said, pressing in her hand hard against his shoulder, and her voice was shaking. Okay, you're gonna be fine. You hear me, you're gonna be fine. Don't, Brooke said through gritted teeth. Don't lie to me, you're a terrible liar. I'm not lying. My husband. Listen to me. He grabbed her wrist with his good hand, and his grip was weaker than it should have been, and that frightened her more than anything. There's an enemy shooter across the runway who has our position. The second you move to that rifle and take a shot, you light yourself up. He'll see your muzzle flash. He knows right where we are. If you start shooting, you're dead. Emily looked down into the valley where the SEAL team was pinned in a broken compound, where wounded men were dragging themselves across the dirt, where 30 fighters were closing in like it was already over. If I don't shoot, she said quietly, they're all dead. You're one rifle. I know what I am. Emily, Brooks tightened his grip. Your orders are observe and report. Observe and report. You are not cleared to engage a force that size. You are supposed to watch and call it in. That's the mission. You start shooting at 30 armed men alone with your spotter down and an enemy sniper hunting you, and there is no version of that where you go home. Do you understand me? There is no version of that where you live. And this was the part Emily Carter never told anyone about, not in the debriefs, not in the interviews, not in the years afterward, when her story was taught to men who would go on to do dangerous things in dark places. She never told them about the 10 seconds she lay on that rock and seriously, honestly considered doing what she was told, following the order, staying hidden, watching the men below and calling it in over the radio, and living to see the sunrise exactly the way her training and her orders and every reasonable instinct in her body told her to. She thought about her father. She thought about the man who had put a rifle in her hands when she was a girl, who had taught her to breathe, to be still, to wait, who had told her 100 times that a shooter's greatest weapon was not the rifle, but the discipline to know when not to use it. She thought about the way he used to say that being good at something dangerous meant nothing at all unless you also knew what it was for. Danny, she said, what's it for? What? Brooks said. What are you talking about? All of it. The years, the training, every cold morning on a range, every shot I ever took. If it's not for this, what's it for? Brooks was quiet for a long moment. Then he let go of her wrist. You're gonna do it anyway, he said. Aren't you? I have to. Then don't do it, stupid. Brooks pushed himself up against the rock, teeth gritted, forcing himself to function through the pain, because that is what a spotter does, even with a bullet in him. You've got no second set of eyes, so you slow down, you take one target, you move, you take one target, you move. You do not stay in one position. The second that enemy shooter gets a fix on you, you're gone. You hear me. Shoot and move. Shoot and move. Shoot and move, Emily repeated. And Brooks looked at her, and there was something in his face that she would remember for the rest of her life. You go save those men. Emily Carter turned to her rifle. It was a semi-automatic precision rifle built for speed, built for a shooter who needed to put rounds on multiple targets fast, and at this range, at this distance in the dark, with the wind moving through the valley and no spotter to read it for her, it was going to demand everything she had ever learned, and probably a little more. She settled in behind it. She put her cheek to the stock. She let her breathing slow down the way her father had taught her before she was old enough to drive. Down in the valley, she found the enemy commander in her scope, the tall man in the dark coat walking through the firefight like he owned it, and she watched him drag a young Marine up onto his knees and press a pistol to the back of his head. No, you don't, Emily whispered. No, you don't. She read the wind as best she could. She adjusted her hold. She thought about the drop over that distance, the way the round would fall across 1,000 meters of cold night air, and she made the correction in her head the way she had made it 10,000 times in training, and she let out half a breath and held the rest. This is for whatever it's for, she whispered, and she pressed the trigger. A full second later, down in the valley, the commander folded into the dirt, and Emily Carter did not celebrate, and did not freeze, and did not wait to see if it had worked. She was already moving. She was already shifting her position, sliding 3 meters left behind the cover of the rocks, because Brooks's voice was in her head. Shoot and move, and she knew that somewhere across the valley, an enemy shooter had just seen her muzzle flash, and was already swinging his rifle toward the place she used to be. One, Brooks said, where he lay. He was tracking for her, spotting for her, even wounded, even fading. You got the commander. Machine gun on the east roof, that's the one hurting them most, that's your next one. I see it. Wind's picked up a little. Hold a touch more right. Holding right. Emily found the machine gunner in her scope, the man behind the weapon that had the SEALs pinned in their broken compound, and she breathed out and pressed the trigger and moved again before the gunner had even finished falling. Two, Brooks said. That gun's down. Em, the whole east side just went quiet. You're doing it. You're actually doing it. RPG, Emily said. There was an RPG crew setting up where? Building at the base of the compound, kneeling in the window. He's about to fire on the SEALs and he's got the launcher up. I don't see him. Talk me on. Follow the wall down from the machine gun nest. Down there. Window on the left low. Emily swept her scope down along the wall, found the window, found the man kneeling there with a rocket launcher balanced on his shoulder, and aimed directly at the compound, where the SEALs were hiding a shot that would have collapsed the wall and killed all 8 of them in an instant, and she had maybe 2 seconds before he fired. Fast, Em, Brooks said. Fast, he's gonna send it. Emily did not have time to read the wind. She did not have time to do anything but trust every hour of her life that had led to this half a second, and she pressed the trigger on instinct and prayer, and the man in the window slumped forward, and the rocket he never got to fire tipped harmlessly out of the tube. 3, Brooks breathed. God almighty, 3. And down in the valley, Emily could see through her scope that something had shifted in the enemy. The confident, laughing men who had been closing in for the kill a moment ago were suddenly stopping, suddenly looking up, suddenly realizing that the thing killing them was not coming from the trapped SEALs at all. It was coming from above, from the hills, from the high ground that they thought they owned. They're catching on, Emily said. They're looking for me. Then keep moving and keep working, Brooks said. You stop. Now they figure out it's one shooter and they come up this mountain after us. As long as you keep dropping them, they'll think there's a whole element up here. Keep the fear alive, Em. Keep them guessing. So Emily kept working. She found the fighters trying to flank the compound, and she dropped them one by one. She found the mortar team setting up in a courtyard, and she took the men working it before they could send a single round. She found a shooter who had crawled up onto a roof to fire down on the SEALs, and she put him down before he got off a burst. And after every shot, she moved sliding along the rocks, changing her position, never letting the enemy sniper across the valley get a fix on her. And Brooks tracked for her the whole time, calling targets, calling wind, his voice getting a little thinner with each passing minute, but never once stopping. How you doing over there, Danny? She said between shots because she had not forgotten for 1 second that her friend was bleeding. I'm fantastic, Brooks said. Never better. Take the guy by the truck. He's got an RPG. Danny, take the shot, Emily. Worry about me later. There's a truck 10 o'clock from the compound guy behind the engine block. He's loading a rocket. Take him. She took him. And this was the thing that was happening down in the valley, the thing Emily could see, and the SEALs could not fully understand yet. The tide was turning. The enemy force that had numbered 30 and had 8 trapped Americans dead to rights was coming apart, not because they were being overwhelmed, but because they were being unmade from a distance by something they couldn't find and couldn't fight. Their commander was dead. Their heavy weapons were silent. Their communications had collapsed into panicked shouting. And every time one of them tried to move on, the compound, a shot rolled down from the hills and stopped him cold. She watched the SEALs begin to move. She watched them realize they had a chance and seize it, watched a small group come over the wall and start pushing toward the near edge of the village, and she understood immediately what they were doing. They're going for the landing zone, she said. Danny, the SEALs are pushing for the LLZ. They're going to try to clear it for the bird. Then cover them, Brooks said. Clear their path. Anybody who leans out to shoot at them, you take. There's a strong point at the LZ I can't hit. Heavy gun dug in behind a wall on the wrong side of a building. No angle from here. Then cover everything you can and let the SEALs handle the one you can't. You can't do all of it, Em. Just do what you can reach. So that is what she did. As the small group of SEALs pushed across open ground toward the landing zone, Emily walked her fire alongside them, dropping the fighter who leaned out of a window to fire on them, silencing the shooter who tried to catch them in the open street, clearing every threat she could see, while the men on the ground fought the close, ugly battle for the strong point she couldn't touch. She watched them reach the last building. She watched a grenade go into the enemy position. She watched two of them flank right and disappear into the smoke, and for a terrible few seconds she couldn't see them at all, and her heart was in her throat. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on, come out of there." And then they came out of the smoke, and the heavy gun was silent, and the landing zone was theirs, and Emily Carter let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for an hour. "They did it," she said. "Danny, they cleared it. They cleared the LZ." There was no answer. Danny. Emily rolled off her rifle and turned to look at her spotter, and the fear that had been sitting in her chest all night finally came all the way up her throat. Brooks was slumped against the rock, his eyes half closed, his good hand fallen away from the wound he'd been holding, and he was still breathing, but it was shallow and slow and wrong. "No," she said, crawling to him. No, Danny, stay with me. Stay with me, Bum. The bird's coming. We just have to get you to the bird." His voice was barely there. "You got to keep shooting. The SEALs, they still got runners on them. If you stop now, I'm not leaving you to bleed out so I can shoot." "That's exactly what you're going to do." Brooks forced his eyes open and looked at her, and even now, even fading, there was steel in it. "Because that's the mission. Those men down there have wounded of their own, and they got a bird coming, and if you stop covering them now, the enemy's going to regroup and hit that helicopter the second it lands. You know that. You know it better than I do. Get back on that rifle." "Danny, please." "Get back on the rifle, Sergeant." "That's not me asking. Cover that bird. I'm not going anywhere, I promise. Now go." And Emily Carter, with tears in her eyes and her best friend's blood on her hands, crawled back to her rifle, and she got back behind the scope, and she covered the landing zone because he was right, and she hated that he was right, and there was nothing else to do. The helicopter came in loud and low. She saw it drop out of the darkness toward the cleared landing zone, and she saw the SEALs begin loading their wounded, and she saw exactly what she had feared. The enemy, scattered and leaderless, but not dead, began to regroup. At the sound of the aircraft began to move toward the exposed men, began to try to bring fire to bear on the helicopter that was the SEAL team's only way out. And Emily met every one of them. Every fighter who tried to move on that landing zone, every shooter who tried to line up on that bird, met around from the hills before he could pull his trigger. "Not tonight," Emily whispered, working the rifle, moving. "Not this bird, not these men, not tonight." She saw a young Marine stagger up the ramp with a wounded man across his shoulders. She saw a limping SEAL herd of the rest aboard. She saw a commander standing on the ramp, the last man up, refusing to board until everyone else was on, and she felt something in her chest, some fierce and aching pride in men she had never met and would never know, men who were about to fly away and live because a girl her father taught to shoot had decided she couldn't watch them die. And then the radio crackled, and a voice came through it, the commander's voice. And it was the first time all night anyone down there had spoken directly to her. "Overwatch, I don't know who you are, but you saved us, every one of us. Whoever you are up there, you saved us, and I am not leaving this country until I know your name. Do you copy? Do you copy?" Emily looked at Brooks slumped against the rock, breathing his shallow, slow breaths. She looked at the runners still moving in the valley, the enemy fighters who had not given up, who would come for that helicopter if it lingered 1 second too long, who would come for her the moment they figured out where she was. She looked at her ammunition, and there was almost none of it left. And she keyed her radio, and she said the only word she had the strength to say: "Go." "Say again, Overwatch. Say again, are you hit? Are you mobile? We can send the bird back for you. Say again." And Emily Carter, lying on a cold rock a kilometer above a valley full of men who wanted her dead, with her friend bleeding beside her and her rifle nearly empty, made the second impossible decision of the night, and it was harder than the first. "Go," she said again. "I've still got runners down here. If the bird stays, they'll bring it down. Get your wounded out. I'll move on foot. Go." "That's not how this works. We don't leave people. You hear me? We do not leave people." "Then you understand me perfectly," Emily said, and her voice cracked because she was thinking of Brooks, because she was thinking of the men in the compound, because she was thinking that maybe this was the last transmission she would ever send. "Because neither do I. Now go, Commander. That's why I'm still up here. Go." And she watched the helicopter buzz. She watched it climb up out of the valley with 8 men aboard who should have been dead, and she felt a relief so enormous it nearly broke her. And right on the heels of it came the cold, hard understanding of exactly what she had just done to herself. She was alone now, truly alone. Her spotter was down and fading. Her ammunition was nearly gone. The helicopter was flying away. And down in the valley, the enemy fighters who had scattered and panicked were beginning to understand something that changed everything for them, the same thing Brooks had feared from the very start. There was no element up in the hills. There was no squad. There had never been a squad. All that death, all that precision, all those impossible shots that had unmade their entire assault had come from one position, one shooter, one rifle. And now that rifle had stopped firing, and the helicopter was gone, and whoever was up there was still up there. They were coming for her now, and she knew it. "Danny," she said, crawling back to her spotter. "Danny, the bird's gone. They got out. Every one of them. You hear me? You did that. We did that." Brooks's eyes fluttered open. "The SEALs," he whispered. "They made it. They made it. All of them." A faint, broken smile crossed his face. "Told you," he said. "Told you it was for something." "Yeah," Emily said. And she was crying now openly because they were alone and no one could see her, and it didn't matter anymore. "Yeah, you told me. Now I'm going to get you off this mountain. I need you to help me. I can't carry you and cover us both. You got to stay with me, Danny. You got to stay awake and help me move. Can you do that?" Brooks reached up and gripped her arm one more time, and his grip was so weak now that it barely registered. "Listen to me. There's a whole enemy force between you and anywhere safe. They know where the shooting came from. They're going to come up this mountain, and they're going to come fast, and they're going to come angry because you just made fools of them in front of everybody. You cannot carry me and outrun them. You can't. The math doesn't work. I'm not leaving you. I'm not asking you to leave me," Brooks said. "I'm asking you to be smart. Get me to cover. Rig me so I can hold a pistol. And then you do what snipers do. You disappear. You use this mountain. You make them chase a ghost. And when you've lost them, when you're clear, you call in our position and you bring help back for both of us." "Danny, that's the plan, Sergeant. That's the only plan, and that gets us both home." "You know it is." And Emily Carter, who had already made 2 impossible decisions that night, looked down at her friend and understood that he was asking her to make a third, and that this one might be the one that haunted her most of all, because it meant leaving him behind, even temporarily, even with a plan, in a place crawling with men who would kill him the moment they found him. She looked out into the darkness, and far below on the slopes of the mountain she saw the first of them, shapes moving up toward her position, flashlights sweeping the rocks, voices calling to one another hard and fast and full of a hatred that had a name now, that had a target, now that was climbing toward her one step at a time. A dozen of them at least, maybe more, all of them coming for the ghost in the hills who had taken everything from them and given 8 strangers their lives. Emily Carter dragged her friend into the deepest cover she could find. She pressed his pistol into his good hand and closed his fingers around it. She checked her own rifle one last time and counted what was left, and it was almost nothing, a handful of rounds against a mountain full of men. "I'll be back for you," she whispered. "I swear it, Danny. I will come back for you. Stay alive. That's an order. Stay alive." And then Staff Sergeant Emily Carter, alone low on ammunition with her friend hidden behind her, and an entire enemy force climbing the mountain to hunt her down, picked up her rifle, turned toward the darkness where the flashlights were coming, and got ready to run for her life. The flashlights were 40 meters below her and closing when Emily Carter made the decision to let them come. Every instinct in her body was screaming at her to run, to put distance between herself and the men climbing the mountain. But she forced herself to stay still behind the rocks and think, because running blind in the dark from a force that outnumbered her 12 to 1 was not a plan. It was a way to die out of breath. She counted the lights, 6 that she could see. But she had learned long ago that the men who carried the flashlights were never the only men on the mountain. The smart ones came up dark off to the sides, letting the ones with the lights draw the fire. "Think," she whispered to herself. "Think, Emily. What did Dad say? What did he always say?" Her father's voice came to her the way it always did when she was most afraid, calm and slow and certain. "Never let them tell you where the fight happens. You tell them. You pick the ground." She had almost no ammunition. That was the hard truth she kept coming back to. A handful of rounds against a mountain full of men. She could not win a firefight, not a real one, not a stand-up trade of bullets. But she did not need to win a firefight. She needed to do something far harder and far smarter. She needed to make 12 angry men believe they were being hunted by a force much larger than one exhausted woman with an almost empty rifle. Okay, she breathed. Okay, we do it your way, Dad. She waited until the nearest flashlight was 30 meters below her, until she could hear the man's boots scraping on the loose rock, until she could hear him breathing hard from the climb. And then she did not shoot him. She shot the rock a foot to his left, and then she was already moving, sliding hard to her right along a shelf of stones she had picked out an hour ago. And by the time the enemy opened up on the muzzle flash, hammering the empty position she had just abandoned, with a storm of return fire, she was 30 feet away and firing again from a completely different angle, one round, and then moving again. The effect was exactly what she wanted. To the men below, it looked like fire from two positions. Then as she kept moving and firing single shots from spot after spot, it looked like three. They could not understand it. They shouted to one another in confusion, spreading out, taking cover, slowing down, because a force that could shoot at them from three directions at once was not a lone survivor. It was an ambush, and you do not charge up a mountain into an ambush. That's it, Emily whispered, sliding into a crevice between two boulders, her chest heaving. Slow down, be afraid, wonder how many of us there are. But she knew this trick had a shelf life. She had maybe 6 rounds left. Every shot she fired to sell the illusion was a shot she would not have when the illusion collapsed, and it would collapse, because sooner or later a smart man down there was going to count the shots, was going to notice that, no matter how many positions the fire seemed to come from, it always came one round at a time, never two rifles firing at once, and he was going to understand the truth. One shooter, moving fast, nearly out. She had to be gone before that happened. 200 meters down the mountain and half a valley away, though Emily could not have known it, the helicopter carrying 8 rescued men was setting down hard at a forward operating base, and Lieutenant Commander Ryan Mitchell was on the ground before the wheels had fully settled, running for the operations center with his heart pounding and one thought in his head. "Where's the commander?" he shouted at the first officer he saw. "Get me whoever's running this show, right now." "Sir, you need to get checked out. You're covered in..." "It's not my blood. Where's the ranking officer? I need eyes back on that valley, and I need them now. We left someone in there." He burst into the operations center, and a major named Halstead looked up from a bank of screens, and Ryan did not wait for permission to speak. "There is a friendly still in that valley," Ryan said. "Army sniper element, the overwatch you assigned to my mission, the one everyone wrote off as dead." "She's not dead. She's alive, and she's on that mountain, and she is the only reason my entire team is standing here right now, and she stayed behind to cover our extraction. I need a bird, and I need it turned around, and I need to go back for her." Halstead stared at him. "Slow down, Commander. Who are we talking about?" "The Overwatch, Staff Sergeant." Ryan stopped. He realized with a jolt of shame that hit him like a physical blow that he did not know her name. This woman had saved his life and the lives of 7 of his men, and he did not even know her name. "Pull the mission roster, the Army sniper team you attached to us. I need names and I need a location, and I need it in the next 5 minutes because every minute we stand here, she is alone in enemy territory." A staff sergeant at one of the terminals was already typing. "Sir, I've got the Overwatch element. 2 personnel. Staff Sergeant Emily Carter Sniper and Sergeant Daniel Brooks Spotter. Last confirmed transmission was early in the engagement. They reported taking fire, and 1 man hit, and then we lost them. They've been listed as unaccounted for the past 2 hours." "They're not unaccounted for," Ryan said. "One of them just saved 8 lives and told me to leave her behind. Carter. Her name is Carter." He said it like he was carving it into stone. "I want a drone over that valley now. I want to know where she is. And I want a bird spinning up." Halstead hesitated, and Ryan saw the hesitation and hated it. "Commander, I understand what you're telling me, but I can't just throw an aircraft into a hot valley full of an enemy force that just tried to wipe out a SEAL team. If they've got surviving RPG capability and they hit that bird on approach, I lose the aircraft, the crew, and you and I still don't get Carter out. I have to think about..." "She didn't think about it," Ryan said quietly. The room went still. "She had orders to observe and report," Ryan said. Observe and report. She was not cleared to engage. She could have followed her orders and watched us die from a safe position and gone home a good soldier who did exactly what she was told. Instead, she engaged a force of 30 by herself with her spotter shot, knowing every single shot she took painted a target on her own back. And she did not stop, and she did not think about the risk to herself. And when the bird came for us, she gave us her seat and told us to go. So respectfully, Major, do not tell me about the risk. She did the math on the risk 2 hours ago, and she decided we were worth it. Now I'm asking you to decide she's worth it, because I already have. For a long moment, Halstead said nothing. Then he turned to the staff sergeant. Get me a drone over that valley, now, and spin up the bird. He looked back at Ryan. You find her on that feed, Commander, and yet I'll give you your aircraft. But you find her first. I'm not sending a bird into that valley blind. Get the drone up, Ryan said. I'll find her. Up on the mountain, Emily Carter was down to 4 rounds and running out of tricks. She had bought herself 20 minutes with the shoot and move illusion 20 precious minutes in which the enemy had crept upward, slowly, cautiously, convinced they were facing a dug-in element rather than a single fleeing shooter. But the illusion was cracking. She had heard it in the last few minutes, a change in the way they moved, a new confidence. And then she had heard the thing she dreaded most, a single voice down below calling out over the others, hard and clear, and commanding a man who had figured it out. She could not understand the words. She did not need to. She understood the meaning in the way the other men responded to it, the way they stopped taking cover and started moving again faster, now spreading wide to cut off her escape, no longer afraid. One of them had counted the shots. One of them had realized there was only one rifle up here, and that it was nearly empty, and that the thing that had destroyed their assault and killed their commander was not an element at all, but a single soldier alone and running. They know, Emily whispered. They know it's just me now. And that changed everything. A cautious enemy she could manage. A confident enemy who knew she was alone and nearly out of ammunition and burdened by a wounded man she refused to abandon. That enemy would run her down. She could feel it in her chest, the cold, clean fear of an animal that has just heard the hounds change their cry. She thought about Brooks hidden 200 meters behind her in the rocks with a pistol in his hand and almost no strength left to use it. She had drawn the enemy away from him. That was the one thing she had managed. She had pulled the whole pack up the mountain after her and away from the place where he lay. If they caught her, they might never find him. That was something. If the worst happened, at least the worst might only happen to her. No, she said out loud, angry at herself. No, you are not thinking like that. You are getting off this mountain and you are coming back for him. Both of you go home. Both of you, that's the mission. She checked her rifle. 4 rounds. And then she did something that took more courage than any shot she had fired all night. She stopped running. Because she understood in that cold, clear way that came to her in the worst moments that she could not outrun them anymore. They were faster than her now, and they were spreading to cut her off, and a straight race down the mountain in the dark was a race she would lose. So she was going to do the last thing they expected. She was going to pick the ground one final time the way her father taught her, and she was going to make them pay a price so steep for the next 50 meters of mountain that they would slow down again and buy Daniel Brooks a little more time to stay alive. She found her spot, a narrow defile where the mountain funneled anyone climbing into a single tight channel, a place where 12 men had to become 2 men, where their numbers meant nothing and her rifle meant everything. She settled in above it. She had 4 rounds, and she was going to make each one count for 10. Come on then, she whispered into the dark. Come and get me. The first 2 fighters came into the defile fast and close together, and Emily took the lead man with her first round and the second man with her second, dropping them both in the space of 2 seconds in the one place on the mountain where their friends could not immediately push past their bodies to get at her. The channel choked with confusion, and the shouting turned to screaming, and the whole pursuit slammed to a halt as a men who a moment ago had been closing in for the kill suddenly discovered that the ghost they were chasing still had teeth. 2 rounds, Emily breathed. 2 rounds left. Make them count. Make them think there's 100 of you. And down at the forward operating base, a drone feed flickered to life on the largest screen in the operations center, and Ryan Mitchell leaned in with his hands flat on the table and his eyes searching the grainy black and white image of the mountain, and what he saw made his blood run cold. There, he said, stabbing a finger at the screen. There, that heat signature up in that defile. That's a single person holding a position. And look at all of that below it. He traced the cluster of heat signatures spread across the slope below the lone figure, a dozen of them more moving upward, spreading wide. That's her. That's Carter. And that entire enemy force is climbing right up on top of her. She's got a whole company hunting her, and she's holding them off from one position. My God, Halstead said, quietly staring at the screen. She's completely surrounded. How is she still alive? Because she keeps picking ground, they can't rush, Ryan said. Look at where she's set up. That choke point. She's making 12 men fight her 2 at a time. That's not luck, Major. That's a professional buying time with the only currency she's got left. But she can't do it forever. Look how spread out they are. They're going to flank that position. They're going to get above her and behind her, and when they do, it's over. She's got minutes. Maybe less. Halstead looked at the screen at the single flickering heat signature, holding off a mountain full of men, and then he looked at Ryan Mitchell, and something in the Major's face changed. Get the bird in the air, Halstead said. Now, Commander, you've got your aircraft. Bring her home. Ryan was already moving. Torres, Kowalski, Reyes on me, we're going back. Everybody who can still walk and shoot, gear up. We leave in 90 seconds. Boss. It was Cole, the young Marine, already on his feet, already reaching for a rifle, despite the fact that an hour ago he'd had a pistol to the back of his skull. I'm coming. You're wounded, kid, and you're not even one of mine. She saved my life, Cole said, and there was nothing in his voice that could be argued with. She stayed behind for us. For me. I am getting on that helicopter, sir, and you can either bring me or you can leave me on the tarmac, but I am not sitting here while she's up there alone. She didn't leave us. I'm not leaving her. Ryan looked at the boy for 1 second, then he tossed him a spare magazine. Then keep up, he said, and do exactly what I tell you. Up on the mountain, Emily fired her 3rd round. She had held the choke point for as long as she could, but Ryan Mitchell had read the drone feed exactly right. They were flanking her. She could hear them now above her, and to her left, men who had climbed wide around her position and were working their way up onto the high ground that had been her only advantage. And once they were above her, the defile that had protected her would become a trap that killed her. She had to move, but every direction she could move was a direction with men in it. Her 3rd round took a fighter who came around the rocks to her left, too close. Close enough that she saw his face in the muzzle flash, close enough that she understood how completely the situation had collapsed. They were on top of her now. The distance that was a sniper's whole world had evaporated. This was not shooting anymore. This was a knife fight with rifles, and she had 1 round left. 1 round. Danny, she whispered, and she was not sure why she said his name, except that if this was the end, she wanted the last thing she said to be to him, to the friend she had promised to come back for, and now maybe never would. Danny, I'm sorry. I tried. I really tried. She heard them closing in from 3 sides. She heard boots on rock close closer. She raised her rifle with its single remaining round, and she picked the direction the nearest sound was coming from, and she prepared to make her last shot the best one of her life. And she thought about her father, and she thought about the 8 men on the helicopter who had gotten out because of her. And she decided that if this was where it ended, then it was a fair trade. 8 lives for one, and she could live with that, and she could die with that. And then over the sound of the men closing in to kill her, over the pounding of her own heart, Emily Carter heard a new sound rising out of the darkness behind her, a deep rhythmic hammering that she knew in her bones that every soldier knows the sound of rotors, the sound of an American helicopter coming in low and fast and angry over the mountain, and a spotlight stabbed down out of the sky and caught the enemy fighters flanking her position full in its beam, and a door gunner opened up from above and turned the high ground the enemy had just seized into the worst place on the mountain to be standing. No, Emily breathed, and she almost couldn't believe her own eyes. No way, no way. A voice came over the radio on her hip, a voice she recognized the commander from the valley, and it was shouting over the roar of the rotors and the hammer of the gun. Carter, Staff Sergeant, Emily Carter, this is Mitchell. Do you copy? We came back. You hear me? We came back for you. Do not give up. We have eyes on your position. Hold on. Emily grabbed the radio with a hand that would not stop shaking. Mitchell, she said, and her voice broke on the word. Mitchell, is that really you? It's really me. It's really us. We're right on top of you. Now listen to me, Carter. We cannot land in these rocks, and we've still got hostiles all around your position, so I need you to do exactly what I say. Do you have a fix on the bird? I've got you. I see you. Good. There's a shelf about 40 meters downhill from your position, southeast. It's the only place flat enough for us to get low enough to pull you up. We are going to clear you a path with the door gun, and you are going to run to that shelf, and we are going to come down and get you. But Carter, I have to know something first, and I need the truth. Ryan's voice dropped, and even over the roar, Emily could hear the weight in it. The drone shows one heat signature at your position. 1. Command has your element as 2 people. Where's Brooks? Where's your spotter? And there it was, the question Emily had been dreading since the moment she heard the rotors. Because the shelf Ryan was talking about, the only place the bird could pull her up, was 40 meters downhill in southeast. And Daniel Brooks was 200 meters uphill and northwest in the opposite direction, hidden in the rocks where she had left him in exactly the part of the mountain the enemy now controlled. To get to the helicopter, she had to leave him behind. Again. And this time there might be no coming back. Carter, Ryan said. Carter, answer me. Where is Brooks? Emily looked northwest up the mountain toward the darkness where her friend was hidden and waiting and trusting her to keep her promise. Then she looked southeast toward the shelf where a helicopter was risking everything to save her life. And she keyed the radio, and she made a decision that Ryan Mitchell would talk about for the rest of his life, a decision that told him everything he would ever need to know about the kind of soldier Emily Carter was. He's uphill, Emily said, northwest of me, 200 meters. He's alive, he's wounded, and he's got enemy all around him. She took a breath. I'm not going to the shelf, Mitchell. I'm going back for Brooks. Carter, no. Carter, listen to me. That's the wrong direction. That's straight into the enemy. We cannot cover you up there. The shelf is the only place we can. I gave him my word, Emily said, and her voice was steady now, steadier than it had been all night, because a person is never so calm as when they have stopped being afraid of the thing they most feared. I told him I'd come back for him. I already left him once tonight. I am not leaving him twice. You want to save me, Commander, then help me save him. Because I am going up that mountain either way, and I would really appreciate the company. There was a silence on the radio just for a second, and then Ryan Mitchell's voice came back, and there was something in it that was almost a laugh. The laugh of a man who has just met someone who thinks exactly the way he does and cannot quite believe his luck. You know something, Carter, Ryan said. My whole team thought the same thing about you an hour ago, that we couldn't leave you. So I guess this is the night nobody gets left behind. His voice sharpened, turned to command. New plan. Torres Reyes, get on that gun. I want everything northwest of Carter's position suppressed. Cole, you and me are fast roping down to link up with Carter and go get her spotter. Pilot, get us over that northwest ridge and keep that gun hot. Carter, you still there? I'm here. We're coming down to you, both of us. And then the 3 of us are going to go get Brooks, and then all 4 of us are going home. You copy? And Emily Carter, alone on a mountain with 1 round left, surrounded, exhausted, and out of tricks, looked up at the helicopter hovering over her in the darkness, with its guns hammering, the enemy off the high ground, and she felt something she had not felt since the moment Daniel Brooks went down beside her, something she had almost forgotten the shape of. She felt like she was not alone anymore. I copy, Commander, she said. I copy. Come on down. Let's go get my friend. And high above the valley, where 8 men had nearly died on a cold mountain full of enemies, a helicopter dropped low over a ridge with its guns blazing, and a SEAL and a young Marine slid down ropes into the dark to stand beside the woman who had refused to leave them, so that together they could all go and refuse to leave one more. Ryan Mitchell hit the mountain hard, rolled off the rope, and came up with his rifle ready before his knees had even stopped complaining, and 3 feet away Cole did the same. And then the 2 of them were looking at the woman who had saved their lives, seeing her face for the first time. She was smaller than Ryan had imagined. That was the strange thing that struck him in the middle of a firefight, the thought that made no sense and yet hit him anyway. He had built a picture of her in his mind over the last 2 hours, this ghost in the hills, who had unmade an entire enemy assault, and somewhere in his head, he had made her into a giant. And here she was, a tired woman crouched in the rocks with dirt on her face, and her friend's blood dried dark on her hands, Holding a rifle he now knew had exactly 1 round left in it, and she had done all of it. All of it. Staff Sergeant Carter, Ryan said. Commander Mitchell, Emily answered. You're a lot of trouble, you know that. So I've been told. She almost smiled, and then the exhaustion in her face gave way to something harder and more urgent. We don't have time. Brooks is 200 meters uphill northwest, and every second we stand here talking is a second they're closing on him. They don't know exactly where he is yet, but they will. We have to move now. Then we move now. Ryan keyed his radio. Torres, we're linked up with Carter. We're pushing northwest to the spotter's position. Keep that gun working the ridge above us, and do not let anybody get up on that high ground ahead of us. You are our cover. You are the only thing keeping the enemy off the ground we need to cross. Copy. Copy, boss. We got you. Torres answered from the helicopter above, and the door gun opened up, again hammering the ridgeline, forcing the enemy fighters who had been closing in to throw themselves flat. Cole, you're on Carter, Ryan said. You do not leave her side. She's nearly out of ammo, so you are her ammo now. Carter, you know the ground you lead. I'll cover our rear. Move. And they moved. Emily took point because she was the only one who knew exactly where Brooks was hidden, and she moved up that mountain in the dark with a certainty that Ryan found almost frightening, weaving through the rocks along a path only she could see. And Cole stayed on her shoulder the whole way. This 22-year-old kid who 8 hours ago had never fired a shot in anger, and now moved like he'd been doing it his whole life, because fear does that to a person. Sometimes it burns away everything that isn't necessary. How much farther? Cole asked low. 100 meters, Emily said. There's a cluster of boulders up ahead, 3 big ones leaning together. He's in the gap in the middle. I left him with a pistol, and I told him to stay dark so he's not going to fire unless somebody's right on top of him. That means if we hear shooting from up there before we reach it. Then somebody found him first, Cole finished. Then somebody found him first. They pushed on faster now, and Ryan covered the rear, walking backward half the time, watching the darkness behind them where the enemy was regrouping, and he could hear it, the shouting, the calling back and forth, the sound of a force that had been scattered, pulling itself back together. And he knew what Emily knew, which was that the door gun could hold the high ground, but it could not be everywhere. And sooner or later, the enemy would find a seam and pour through it. Then from the darkness ahead, up near the cluster of boulders, a pistol fired. Twice. Sharp and close. Danny, Emily breathed, and she broke into a run. Carter, wait, wait, Ryan hissed, but she was already gone, already sprinting up through the rocks toward the sound of her friend fighting for his life, and Cole was right behind her, and Ryan had no choice but to follow, cursing under his breath, because you do not let a soldier run alone into fire, no matter how much you want to slow them down. They came around the boulders and into a nightmare. 2 enemy fighters had found Brooks. One was down, already dropped by the pistol shots they'd heard, but the second was standing over Daniel Brooks with a rifle raised, and Brooks was on his back in the gap between the rocks, his pistol arm shaking empty or jammed or simply out of strength, staring up at the man about to kill him. Emily did not have time to raise her rifle and aim. She did not have time for the careful, patient discipline shooting her father had taught her. She had time for exactly one thing, the single round left in her rifle and a snapshot from the hip at 10 feet, and she took it, and the fighter standing over Brooks dropped, and the click of Emily's rifle going empty was the loudest sound on the mountain. Danny, she gasped, throwing herself down beside him. Danny, I'm here. I came back. I told you I'd come back. Brooks looked up at her, and his face was gray, and his voice was barely a whisper, but his eyes were clear. Took you long enough, he said. What did you do? Stop for coffee? You're impossible, Emily said, and she was laughing and crying at the same time, and her hands were already moving over his wounds, checking, assessing the way she'd been trained. You're absolutely impossible, you know that. I heard a helicopter. Brooks's eyes drifted toward Ryan and Cole. These the guys, the ones from the valley. Yeah, they came back, for me, and now we're all going back for you, and nobody left behind, Brooks whispered. You crazy woman, you actually pulled it off. Not yet, I haven't. We're still on this mountain. Emily looked up at Ryan, and her voice snapped back into command. He's lost a lot of blood. He can't walk. We're going to have to carry him. And the shelf where the bird can pull us up is back the way we came, southeast downhill, which means we have to carry a man who can't move back across ground that's crawling with enemy in the dark with me out of ammunition. Then it's a good thing you brought friends who aren't, Ryan said. He was already down on a knee beside Brooks. Sergeant, this is going to hurt, and I'm sorry about that, but I need you to stay with us. Cole helped me get him up. Carter, take Cole's rifle. You're a better shot than any of us, and I'm not having our best gun run dry when I've got a spare. Trade. Emily stared at him for half a second and then understood and took Cole's rifle, and just like that, she had teeth again, a full magazine in the hands of the deadliest shooter on the mountain. And Ryan saw the change come over her the instant the weight of a loaded weapon settled into her grip. Torres, Ryan said into the radio, hauling Brooks up with Cole taking the other side. We have the spotter. He's alive, but he's in bad shape. We're carrying him. We are moving back to the extraction shelf southeast downhill. I need that gun to peel back and cover our route out. We are slow and we are heavy and we are going to be exposed the whole way. Keep them off us. On it, boss, but you gotta hurry. Torres came back tight. We got movement all over the slope below you now. They're figuring out where you're headed, and we're burning fuel up here. I don't know how much longer the bird can stay on station. Understood. We're moving. And then began the hardest 200 meters of Emily Carter's life. They went down the mountain slow, two men carrying a third between them, and Emily went ahead of them and to the side the loaded rifle up, and she became again what she had been all night, the thing in the dark that killed anything that threatened the people she had decided to protect. But it was different now. It was not the careful long-range work of a sniper on a ridge. It was close and fast and desperate, snapping off shots at fighters who appeared out of the rocks at 20 feet and at 30 feet, buying the men behind her the seconds they needed to keep moving. And every time she fired, she moved the old discipline, holding even now shoot and move, Brooks's own voice in her head from the beginning of the night. On your left, she called back, two of them coming up the draw. I've got them. 2 shots. Down. Keep moving. Keep moving. You hear that, Danny? Cole grunted, hauling the wounded man along. She's covering us, just like she covered us in the valley. That's what she does, Brooks whispered, his head lolling. That's what she does, kid. She covers people. Halfway down, the enemy got smart, and Emily felt the whole shape of the fight change again. They stopped coming at her 1 and 2 at a time and started massing, pulling together into a real assault. A dozen fighters or more pushing up from below to hit the little group before it could reach the shelf. And Emily understood in a heartbeat that she could not hold them all, that there were too many, that the 4 of them carrying a wounded man could not fight through a coordinated push. Mitchell, she said, and there was something new in her voice. There's too many. They're massing below us. We're not going to make it to the shelf carrying Brooks, not through that. They'll cut us off. What are you saying, Carter? I'm saying somebody has to hold them here while the rest of you get Brooks to the shelf, Emily said, and Ryan understood exactly what she was doing, and he understood it because it was the same thing she had done in the valley 3 hours ago, and he was already saying no before she finished. I've got the rifle and the full magazine. I can hold this choke point and keep them off you long enough for you 3 to reach the shelf and get Brooks up. Then I break contact and follow. Absolutely not, Ryan said. No, we are not doing this again. You are not staying behind again, Carter. I did not come back up this mountain to leave you on it. It's the only way the math works, Emily said, and her voice was calm and reasonable and terrible. You can't carry Brooks and fight through that force at the same time. Somebody has to buy you the time. I'm the shooter. It's me. It was always going to be me. Carter, get him to the bird commander. That's the mission. That was always the mission. Get the wounded out. And then Daniel Brooks, who everyone thought had drifted past the point of speaking, lifted his head off Cole's shoulder, and he said in a voice that was barely there, but somehow reached every one of them, no. Emily froze. Danny. No, Brooks said again. You listen to me, Emily Carter. All night long you've been making this choice. In the valley you made it. On the ridge you made it. And every single time the choice was you staying behind so somebody else could live. And every single time I let you because there was no other way and because that's who you are. His breath rattled. But I am not letting you do it one more time. Not to buy time for me. Do you understand? I am not going to be the reason you die on this mountain. If you stay behind to save me, then everything I've done tonight, everything you carried me through it was all for nothing. Because it cost me the one person I was trying to keep alive. Danny, if I don't hold them, none of us make it. Then we all make it or none of us do, Brooks said. That's the deal. That's the deal I'm making right now. Nobody left behind. You said it yourself. You don't get to use that on everybody but yourself, Em. It applies to you too. It always applied to you too. And in the middle of that mountain with enemy fighters massing below them, and a helicopter burning fuel above them, and a wounded man refusing to let his own life be traded for hers. Something broke open in Emily Carter that she had been holding shut all night, and Ryan Mitchell saw it happen, saw the woman who had made herself into a weapon, remember that she was also a person, and it was Ryan who found the answer. He's right, Ryan said, and there's another way. Carter, you don't hold them alone, and you don't stay behind. We do it together. He keyed his radio. Torres, change of plan. Forget peeling back to cover our route. I need you to bring the bird right down on top of the enemy massing below us and put everything you have into them. I don't need you to cover a retreat. I need you to break that assault. Right now. Buy us 30 seconds of case and we run for the shelf all at once. All four of us, Brooks, in all. Boss, that's danger close if I open up that low with you that near. I know exactly how close it is. Do it anyway. Now, Torres, now. And the helicopter dropped like a falling stone, roaring down out of the darkness directly over the massing enemy, and the door gun opened up at a range so close that Emily could feel the heat of it, and the enemy assault that had been forming below them simply came apart under the weight of it, fighters scattering, diving for cover, the coordinated push dissolving into every man for himself. Now, Ryan roared. Everybody now run for the shelf. And they ran. Ryan and Cole carried Brooks between them, half dragging him now, and Emily ran alongside with the rifle up, firing at anything that lifted its head out of the chaos, all four of them pounding down the mountain toward the shelf, while the helicopter hammered the ground behind them and kept the shattered enemy pinned. It was 30 meters. It was 20. It was 10. And a fighter rose up out of the rocks directly in their path, directly between them and the shelf, so close, there was no time, and Emily put him down without breaking stride. And then they were there, they were on the shelf, and the helicopter was wheeling around and coming in. Get Brooks up first, Emily shouted over the rotors. Get him up, get him up. The bird came in low, and Torres and Reyes reached down and hauled Daniel Brooks up into the cabin, and then Cole was up, and Ryan was pushing Emily toward the aircraft. And for 1 second, one terrible second, Emily looked back up the mountain she had bled on all night. And then she reached up and took Torres's hand and was pulled up into the helicopter, and the shelf fell away beneath her, and the mountain fell away, and the whole valley of her nightmares fell away into the darkness below. She collapsed against the floor of the cabin next to Brooks, and she grabbed his hand, and he squeezed back weak, but they're alive, and she pressed her forehead against his, and she cried finally all the way she had not let herself cry the entire night, because they were on the helicopter, all of them, every one of them, and nobody had been left behind. We made it, Danny, she said. We made it. Both of us, all of us. Told you, Brooks whispered, and even now there was that ghost of a smile. Told you it was for something. Ryan Mitchell sat down heavily across from her, his chest heaving, and for a long moment he just looked at Emily Carter, at this exhausted, bleeding, extraordinary soldier who had turned an entire battle by herself and then refused to leave anyone behind. Not the SEALs, not her spotter, not until every single person she was responsible for was safe. And he thought about how close command had come to writing her off. He thought about how close he had come in the first chaos of the ambush to accepting that his Overwatch was dead and there was no one coming. He thought about the fact that 8 men had gotten off that valley floor alive, and now a 9th and a 10th off this mountain, and all of it, every life traced back to one woman who had decided that the orders she'd been given mattered less than the men she could see dying. Carter, Ryan said finally over the roar of the rotors, I have to ask you something, and I've been trying to figure out how to ask it since I heard your voice on the radio. Emily looked up at him, still holding Brooks's hand. Ask. Your orders were observe and report. You told me that yourself. You were not cleared to engage a force that size. You had every reason, every justification in the world to stay hidden and stay quiet and go home alive, and nobody would have ever blamed you. Nobody would have even known there was a choice to make. Ryan leaned forward. So I have to know. Up there on that ridge when you saw us walk into that ambush, when you knew that the second you pulled the trigger, you'd be painting a target on your own back with your spotter already down beside you. Why did you do it? Why did you throw all of that away for 8 men you'd never even met? And Emily Carter was quiet for a moment, holding her friend's hand, feeling the helicopter carry all of them away from the worst night of their lives. And when she answered, she did not answer the way a hero answers in a movie. She answered the way a tired person answers when they have stopped performing and there's nothing left but the truth. My father taught me to shoot when I was a girl, she said. He was patient about it, made me learn to be still, made me learn to wait, and I used to think the whole point was the shooting. Being good at it, being the best. That's what I chased for years. She looked down at Brooks, and then one day he told me something I didn't understand until tonight. He said being good at something dangerous means nothing at all unless you know what it's for. He said a rifle in the hands of someone with no reason is just a way to hurt people. But a rifle in the hands of someone who knows what it's for, that's something else. That's a promise. That's a way of standing between the people you can protect and the thing that wants to hurt them. She looked up at Ryan. When I saw you all walk into that valley, she said, I finally understood what it was for. That's all. That's the whole answer. I didn't do anything special, Commander. I just finally figured out what all those years were for, and then I did it. When someone depends on you, you don't walk away. Not the SEALs, not Danny, not anybody. You just don't walk away. That's it. That's the whole thing. The cabin was quiet. Ryan Mitchell looked at her for a long moment, and then he nodded slowly, and he understood that he had just heard the truest thing anyone had ever said to him about what any of them did out here and why. You know, Ryan said quietly, back in the valley before the bird came for us the first time I made my whole team a promise. I told them we were coming back for you. I told them we were not leaving this country without you. And every one of them, wounded and half dead, said yes. Cole here threatened to fight me if I left him behind. He glanced at the young Marine who managed a tired grin. You did that, Carter. You made 10 strangers decide that nobody was worth leaving behind. That's not nothing. That's about the furthest thing from nothing there is. Emily didn't say anything. She just held on to Brooks's hand and she closed her eyes, and for the first time in what felt like 100 years, she let herself rest because the shooting was over, and the mountain was behind them, and every single person she had been carrying all night was still breathing, and the helicopter was flying home. But the night was not quite finished with its surprises. Because as the aircraft leveled out and turned toward Base Reyes, who had been working on Brooks the whole time, keeping pressure on the wounds, checking him over, suddenly went very still. And then he looked up and his face had changed. Commander, Reyes said. Sir, I need you to look at this. What is it? Ryan said. Is Brooks? No, he's stable. He's holding on. That's not it. Reyes had Brooks's gear laid open, was staring at something in the spotter's equipment, at a small ruggedized device he'd pulled from a pouch on the man's vest, and his voice had dropped to something careful and low. Sir, this is Brooks's equipment, and there's something on here you need to see. Something that changes what happened tonight. Something about that ambush. Emily's eyes snapped open. What are you talking about? What about the ambush? Reyes looked at her and then at Ryan and then back down at the device in his hands, and when he spoke, his voice was so quiet it barely carried over the rotors. This ambush wasn't random, Reyes said. They knew we were coming. They knew our route. They knew exactly where the overwatch would be set up. That's why they had a sniper on your position from the first minute, Carter. That doesn't happen by accident. Somebody told them. Somebody on our side told them everything. He held up the device. And whatever's on here is the reason Brooks was carrying it off that mountain. Ryan Mitchell reached across the shaking cabin and took the device out of Reyes's hands, and for a long moment he just held it, staring at it, feeling the weight of what it meant settle onto him like a second man on his back. Say that again, Ryan said. Slow. Tell me exactly what you're looking at. It's a signals intercept unit, boss, Reyes said. Standard kit for a spotter. They use it to pull enemy comms log frequencies, that kind of thing. But Brooks was doing more than logging enemy chatter. Look at the timestamps. He was flagging something, hours before the ambush. He'd tagged a whole string of intercepts and marked them urgent, and then he tried to package them to send up the chain, and the send failed. It never went through. Whatever he found, he was trying to warn somebody, and nobody got the message. Emily was staring at Brooks now, at her spotter, at the man she had carried down a mountain, and something cold was crawling up the back of her neck. Danny, she said low. Danny, can you hear me? What's on that device? What did you find? Brooks's eyes fluttered. He was fading in and out, and Reyes was working to keep him with him. But at the sound of Emily's voice, at the urgency in it, something in him surfaced. His lips moved. He whispered. I'm here. Danny Reyes found your intercept unit. He says you flagged something before the mission. He says you tried to send a warning, and it never went through. What did you find? What were you trying to tell them? Brooks's hand tightened on hers, and it took everything he had left to speak, and the words came out in broken pieces one at a time, but every one of them landed in that cabin like a stone dropped into still water. They knew, Brooks whispered. They knew our route before we ever stepped off. I picked up their comms the night before. They were talking about a SEAL element, talking about Overwatch on the high ground, talking about where the sniper team would set up. His breath rattled. Nobody knew that. Nobody outside the planning. The route was classified. The Overwatch position was classified. But they had all of it. Somebody gave it to them, Somebody on our side gave them everything. The cabin had gone completely silent, except for the roar of the rotors. Cole was staring at Brooks with his mouth open. Torres had turned around from the door gun, and Ryan Mitchell felt the whole night rearrange itself in his head, felt every terrible thing that had happened take on a new and sickening shape. That's why the sniper was already on your position in the first minute, Ryan said slowly, working it through out loud. That's why they knew to put a shooter on the Overwatch before the shooting even started. They weren't reacting to you, Carter. They were waiting for you, They knew exactly where you'd be. They knew where I'd be, Emily repeated, and her voice was hollow. They put a man on me before I fired a single shot. Danny got hit in the first minute because they knew he'd be there. And they let the SEAL team walk all the way into the valley, Ryan said, because they knew our route and they knew our timing, and they had the whole thing set up before we ever crossed the line of departure. That wasn't an ambush we stumbled into. That was an execution somebody scheduled. He looked down at the device in his hand, and his jaws tightened. Somebody sold us. Somebody with access to the mission plan sold every single one of us to those men. And the only reason it didn't work is because Brooks caught a whisper of it the night before, and because you refused to follow your orders, Carter. If you'd done what you were told, if you'd stayed hidden and watched us die, this would have been a clean kill. Nobody would ever have known it was betrayed. We'd all just be dead men in a valley, and whoever did this would have gotten away with it clean. Danny tried to warn them, Emily said, and there was anguish in it now because she was understanding something terrible. He tried to send it up the chain and it failed. Ryan, what if it didn't fail? What if somebody stopped it? What if the same person who sold us made sure the warning never got through? Nobody answered her because there was no answer. Only the awful weight of the possibility, and the four of them sat in the shaking cabin and stared at each other as the full shape of it came clear. This was not over. This was not a story about surviving a bad night. Somebody had wanted them dead, somebody with a uniform and a clearance and a seat at the table where the mission was planned, and that somebody was still out there, still had access, still did not know that Daniel Brooks had walked off that mountain alive with the proof in his vest. Reyes, Ryan said, that device, who else knows Brooks was carrying it? Nobody, boss. I just found it. It's been in his gear the whole time. As far as anybody up the chain knows, Brooks is just a wounded spotter we pulled off a mountain. They don't know what he found. They don't know he was flagging their comms. They don't know any of it. Then it stays that way, Ryan said, and his voice had dropped into something hard and quiet and dangerous. Until we know who we can trust, that device does not leave my hands, and what's on it does not leave this cabin. You understand me, all of you. As far as anyone at that base is concerned, tonight was a bad ambush and a good rescue and nothing more. Nobody says the word betrayal. Nobody says a soul sold us out. Not until we know who it was. Ryan, Emily's voice was tight. If somebody at that base did this, then we're about to fly right back into the same trap. That's where they are. Whoever sold us is going to be standing on that tarmac when we land, smiling, welcoming us home, wondering why we're not dead. I know, Ryan said. I've thought about that. So what do we do? Ryan looked at her, and then he looked at Brooks fading in and out on the floor of the cabin, and then he looked at the device in his hands, and when he answered, there was no fear in his voice, only a cold and settled resolve. We land, Ryan said. We get Brooks to the medics because whatever else happens, that man is going to live. We did not carry him off a mountain to lose him on the ground. And then we play the part. We're grateful we're exhausted. We're just glad to be home. We give them nothing. We watch every face on that tarmac, and we find the one that flinches when it sees us walk off this bird alive. Because somebody down there planned a funeral for all of us tonight, and they are about to watch every single body they ordered killed walk off this helicopter breathing. He turned the device over in his hand, and then quietly, carefully, when we're sure we take everything on this device and we hand it to someone we trust and we burn the traitor down to the ground. Slow and legal and permanent. Emily looked at him for a long moment. You've done this before, she said. Hunted somebody, not on a mountain, the other kind. No, Ryan admitted. I haven't, but somebody tried to murder my entire team tonight, and they used you and Brooks as part of the setup, and they nearly cost me 8 men and this kid and both of you. So I'm going to learn fast. He met her eyes. You in, because I'll be honest with you, Carter, I could use the best shooter I've ever seen watching my back for whatever comes next. And I don't trust anybody on that base except the people in this cabin right now. Emily looked around the helicopter, at Ryan steady and grim, at Cole young and fierce and wide awake now with the terrible knowledge of what he'd learned, at Reyes and Torres watching waiting, at Daniel Brooks on the floor, her friend, the man who had caught the whisper that saved them all and paid for it with a bullet still fighting to breathe. And she understood that the night that had started as one kind of story, a story about a sniper and a trapped SEAL team, had just become something else entirely, something with a longer reach and a darker heart, and that walking away from it now was as impossible as walking away had been on the ridge and on the mountain, and in the gap between the boulders where she'd fired her last round to save the man on the floor. You already know my answer, Emily said. I don't walk away. I told you that. It applies to this too. Ryan almost smiled. Yeah, he said. I figured it might. Brooks stirred on the floor and his eyes came open, and he looked up at the two of them, at Emily and Ryan leaning over him, and even now, even gray and broken and barely conscious, he seemed to understand what had just been decided in that cabin. You two, he whispered, are going to be a lot of trouble for somebody. Rest, Danny, Emily said, gripping his hand. You did your part. You did more than your part. You caught it. You warned us. You held on. Now you rest and you let us carry the rest of it. You've earned that. His eyes found hers, and there was something urgent in them. Something he needed to say before whatever was pulling him under pulled him all the way. Whoever did this, whoever sold the route, they didn't just sell the SEALs. They sold you. They sold me. They put a man on our position specifically. They wanted the Overwatch dead first because a live sniper on the high ground ruins the whole ambush. His grip tightened. They knew what you could do, Em. They knew that if you were alive and shooting, the whole thing could fall apart. That's why they came for us first. They were afraid of you before the first shot. Whoever this is, they know exactly who you are, and now they're going to find out you're not dead, and they are going to be very, very afraid. And with that, Daniel Brooks's eyes slipped closed again, and Reyes bent back over him, checking his pulse, calling out that he was still stable, still holding, but Emily barely heard it because Brooks's words were echoing in her head, and they had put something in her chest that had not been there a moment ago. They came for me first. They were afraid of me before the first shot. She looked out the open door of the helicopter at the lights of the base coming up out of the darkness ahead, the base where somebody was waiting who had ordered her death hours ago and did not yet know she was still alive, and the exhaustion that had been dragging her towards sleep burned away and left something cold and clear and awake in its place. Ryan, she said, not taking her eyes off the approaching lights. When we land, that person you were talking about, the one whose face flinches when they see us walk off alive. She finally looked at him. I want to be the one who sees it. I want to be looking at them when they realize we made it. Because Danny's right. They were afraid of me before they ever put a man on my position. And I want them to understand the second we step off this bird that they had every reason to be. You'll be standing right next to me, Ryan said. Both of us. We walk off together. We let every face on that tarmac see the two people who were supposed to die first walk off this helicopter, side by side, breathing, and we watch what happens. He looked down at the device in his hand one last time, then zipped it deep into an interior pocket of his vest out of sight close to his chest. And then we start hunting the real enemy, the one who was never on that mountain at all. The helicopter dropped toward the lights of the base, and inside the cabin, 10 people who should have been dead sat close together in the dark, bound now by more than a rescue, bound by a secret and a betrayal and a shared and silent promise. Down below on the tarmac, figures were gathering: medics with stretchers, officers with clipboards, a small crowd assembling to receive the survivors of a mission that had gone catastrophically wrong. And somewhere in that gathering crowd, Emily Carter knew stood a person who had already counted them all as dead, a person who was about to look up and see the woman they had ordered killed first walk down the ramp alive and looking straight back at them. She checked the rifle in her hands out of pure habit, and then she remembered it was Cole's, and she handed it back to the young Marine with a small nod of thanks, and she flexed her empty hands, and she found that they were not shaking anymore. All night they had trembled from the cold and the fear and the sheer exhaustion of it, and now flying toward the person who had tried to have her murdered, they were perfectly still. Her father's voice came to her one more time, quiet and certain the way it always did in the moments that mattered most. Being good at something dangerous means nothing unless you know what it's for. I know what it's for, Emily said softly to no one, to her father, to herself. I've always known. I just didn't know how far it went. The wheels touched down. The ramp came open. The night air rushed in. And Emily Carter and Ryan Mitchell stood up together side by side and walked out of the helicopter and down the ramp into the light, into the waiting crowd, into the beginning of a hunt that neither of them yet fully understood. Two soldiers who had refused to leave anyone behind on the mountain, now carrying the one secret that could bring down the person who had tried to bury them all. And as Emily's boots touched the tarmac, as she scanned the gathered faces one by one, searching for the flinch, searching for the flicker of shock in the eyes of someone who had believed her dead, she felt the whole weight of the night settle onto her shoulders and strangely make her stronger for carrying it. 8 SEALs alive, Cole alive, Brooks alive on a stretcher being rushed toward the medics who would save his life. Every person she had been responsible for that night breathing. She had not left a single one of them behind. And now there was one more thing that would not be left behind. One more debt that would not go unpaid. Somewhere in front of her in the crowd was a face that belonged to a traitor. And Staff Sergeant Emily Carter, the sniper they had feared enough to kill first, the woman who did not walk away from anyone or anything, fixed her eyes on that crowd and began quietly, patiently, the way her father had taught her to look. She found the flinch 3 seconds after her boots hit the tarmac. Emily Carter had spent her whole life learning to see the thing that did not belong, the shape that was wrong, the movement that gave away what a person was trying to hide. And so when she scanned the gathered crowd of officers and medics and support staff waiting to receive the survivors, her eyes did not linger on the men rushing forward with stretchers or the officers with their clipboards. They went straight to the one face that had frozen. One man standing slightly apart from the others, a logistics officer she vaguely recognized, a major named Cordell, who handled mission planning and coordination. And when Cordell saw Emily Carter walk down that ramp alive, his face did something that no amount of training could fully hide. For half a second before he caught himself, before he pasted on the relieved and welcoming expression everyone else wore, Major Cordell looked at her like she was a ghost, like she was the dead come back to walk among the living, like the sight of her breathing was the worst thing that had happened to him all night. Ryan, Emily said very quietly, not moving her lips much, keeping her eyes forward. 10 o'clock. Major Logistics standing apart from the group. Don't look yet. Count to 5. Ryan Mitchell kept walking, kept his face easy and tired, counted, and then let his gaze drift naturally across the crowd, and when it passed over Cordell, he saw it too. The last traces of it, a man working too hard to look normal, a man whose relief did not reach his eyes. I see him, Ryan murmured. Cordell, he was in the planning cell. He had the route, he had the overwatch positions, he had all of it. That's our man. Maybe, Ryan said. Maybe, but we don't move on a flinch, Carter. A flinch isn't proof. Half these people thought we were all dead an hour ago. Seeing any of us alive is going to put a strange look on a lot of faces. We need what's on Brooks's device to match up to him specifically. We need it clean. We move too fast on a guess, and we tip him off and we lose him. And worse than that, if we're wrong, we destroy an innocent man. He kept his voice level, kept his stride even, playing the part of the exhausted survivor for anyone watching. So we smile, we shake hands, we let them get Brooks to the medics, and we give Cordell no reason in the world to think we know anything at all. It was the hardest thing Emily had done all night, and she had done a great many hard things that night. Walking past Major Cordell, taking the man's outstretched hand, when he offered it, hearing him say in a voice that had steadied itself back into something almost convincing, "Sergeant Carter, thank God we'd written you off. This is a miracle, an absolute miracle." And smiling back at him and saying, "Thank you, sir," and meaning to tear his whole world down to the foundations, all while shaking the hand that she was nearly certain had signed her death warrant. She held his eyes for exactly 1 second longer than she needed to. Just one. Just long enough to let a small, cold question form somewhere in the back of Cordell's mind, a question he could not quite name, a splinter of doubt about whether the miracle standing in front of him knew more than a miracle should. Then she let go and moved on and followed the stretcher carrying Daniel Brooks toward the medical bay. "You held that together well," Ryan said, falling into step beside her. "I've been holding things together all night," Emily said. "One more hour won't kill me." She glanced back once, just once at Cordell, who was watching the stretcher, watching Brooks, and she saw the new tension in the man's posture, and she understood it instantly. Ryan, he's looking at Brooks. He's realized Brooks is alive. So if Brooks caught their comms, if Brooks is the reason the warning almost got out, then Cordell has to be wondering right now how much Brooks knows, and whether Brooks talked, and whether a dying spotter on a stretcher is a loose end he can afford to leave breathing. Emily's voice dropped hard and urgent. "He tried to have us all killed to keep this quiet. A man who does that doesn't stop being dangerous when the ambush fails. He gets more dangerous. Danny is not safe in that medical bay. Not while Cordell is walking around free and wondering what he knows." Ryan understood immediately, and he did not waste time. "Reyes," he said into his radio low, "change of plan. You do not leave Brooks. You stay on him in the medical bay. You do not let him out of your sight, and you do not let anyone near him that you don't personally know and trust. Anybody tries to adjust his meds, change his lines, move him, anything, you stop them, and you call me. I don't care if they're wearing a white coat and a full colonel's rank. Nobody touches Brooks without you watching." "Copy. Copy, boss," Reyes came back. "What's going on?" "I'll explain later. Just guard that man with your life. He is the most important person on this base right now, and there is at least one person here who would be a lot more comfortable if he stopped breathing. Do not let that happen." Emily let out a breath. "Thank you." "He caught the warning that saved all of us," Ryan said. "He's not dying on my base because I moved too slow. Now come on, we've got a device to look at, and we need somewhere private to do it, and we need someone we can trust to bring it to, and I have exactly one name in mind." The someone Ryan had in mind was a woman named Colonel Sarah Whitfield, and she was not at the base. She was 200 miles away at a regional headquarters, and she was the one person in the entire chain of command that Ryan Mitchell would have trusted with his life without a second thought, because she had already saved it once years ago in a different country in a different war. But reaching her meant getting to a secure line, and getting to a secure line meant moving through the base, and moving through the base meant that at some point Major Cordell was going to notice that the two people who should be collapsing into medical beds and after action interviews were instead moving with quiet purpose toward the communications center, and he was going to start asking himself why. They made it 20 minutes before Cordell moved. Emily felt it before she saw it, the way she had felt things all night, a wrongness in the air, a shape that did not belong. She and Ryan had found an empty planning room off the communications corridor, and Ryan had the device out, and they were scrolling through the intercepts. Brooks had flagged the timestamps, the frequencies, the terrible clear proof that the enemy had known everything hours in advance. When Emily's eyes flicked up to the small window in the door, and she saw a shadow pass and pause and pass again. "Ryan," she said without moving, "we've got company. Somebody just walked past that door twice." Ryan slid the device into his vest and stood easy casual, a man with nothing to hide. And he opened the door, and Major Cordell was standing there in the corridor, and the two men looked at each other, and everything that was not being said filled the space between them like water filling a sinking room. "Commander Mitchell," Cordell said, "you should be in medical. Both of you. You've been through hell tonight. There's no need for either of you to be up and about. Let me walk you back." "Appreciate it, Major," Ryan said, and his voice was perfectly friendly, perfectly easy. "But we're all right. Just needed a minute somewhere quiet. It's a lot coming back from something like that, you understand?" "Of course." Cordell's eyes moved past Ryan into the room to Emily and then briefly down to the front of Ryan's vest to the exact spot where the device was hidden. And Emily watched him do it, and she knew. And Cordell saw her watching him do it. And in that instant, a silent understanding passed between all three people in that corridor that could never be taken back. "What have you got there, Commander?" Cordell said, and his voice had changed, gone quieter, gone careful. "Something from the mission, something you recovered." "Just my own gear, Major." "That's not your gear," Cordell said. "That's a spotter's intercept unit. That's Sergeant Brooks's equipment." And now the mask was coming off slowly, the friendly relieved officer dissolving into something colder and more frightened and more dangerous, because a cornered man is the most dangerous kind of all. "You've been in medical for 20 minutes, Commander, and instead of resting, you're in a locked planning room going through a signals intercept unit that belongs to a wounded man. Now, why would you do that? What are you looking for? What do you think you found?" "Why don't you tell me, Major?" Ryan said, and he stopped pretending to because there was no point anymore. The thing was out in the open now, standing in the corridor between them, and it could not be put away. "Why don't you tell me what a man would find on a spotter's intercept unit that would make him so nervous? Why don't you tell me why you flinched when Carter walked off that helicopter? Why don't you tell me why you're standing here right now instead of doing your job worried about a device you shouldn't even know Brooks was carrying?" The corridor went very still. "You have no idea what you're doing," Cordell said quietly. "You have no idea what you're standing in the middle of. You think this is simple. You think there's a good guy and a bad guy, and you've caught the bad guy. You don't understand anything." His hand had drifted toward his side, slow, casual, the way a man reaches for something he doesn't want you to see him reaching for. "Give me the device, Commander. Give it to me now, and this ends quietly, and everybody gets to go home. You, your team, the girl, all of you. You survived tonight. Don't throw it away over something you don't understand." "The girl," Emily said from inside the room, and she had risen from her chair, and there was something in her voice that made Cordell's eyes snap to her. "You keep saying the girl. You put a sniper on my position before the first shot, Major. You knew exactly where I'd be, and you sent a man to kill me first before the ambush even started, because you knew a live shooter on that ridge could ruin the whole thing. You were afraid of me before you ever met me." She took a step toward the door, toward him, and she was not armed. She had handed Cole's rifle back on the helicopter. She had nothing in her hands at all, and somehow that made her more frightening, not less. "You wanted me dead first. You sat in a planning room and you decided that Staff Sergeant Emily Carter was the most dangerous person in that valley, and you arranged to have her killed before anyone else. Well, here I am, Major, alive, standing in front of you. You were right to be afraid. You just did something about it a few hours too early." Cordell's hand closed on the grip of the pistol at his side. He never got it clear of the holster, because Cole was behind him, the young Marine who had followed them quietly through the base without a word, who had positioned himself at the far end of the corridor and waited and watched exactly the way Emily had taught the whole team to do, without even realizing she was teaching them. Stepped up behind Major Cordell and put the muzzle of his rifle against the back of the man's neck, and said in a voice that did not shake at all, "Take your hand off it, sir, slow. You put a gun to the back of my head tonight through that commander of yours. I'd think real hard before you put another one anywhere." Cordell froze. "Cole," Ryan said, "easy." "I'm easy, boss," Cole said, and he was. His hands were perfectly steady. "I just want the Major to understand his situation. He tried to have all of us killed. He tried to have her killed first. And now he's standing in a hallway with his hand on a gun thinking about whether he can be faster than the people who walked off that mountain alive." He pressed the muzzle a fraction harder against Cordell's neck. "You can't, sir. Take your hand off the pistol." And Major Cordell slowly took his hand off the pistol. Ryan stepped forward and disarmed him, and Emily came out of the room, and the three of them stood around the traitor in the empty corridor. And for a moment, nobody spoke, because the enormity of it was still settling on all of them, the understanding that the man who had nearly killed them all had been here the whole time walking, the halls shaking their hands one of their own. "Why?" Emily said finally. "That's the only thing I want to know. That's the only thing that matters. Why? Why would you do this? These were your people. We were your people. You sat in the room and planned the mission that was supposed to bring us home, and then you sold every one of us to men who were going to execute us in a valley. Why?" And Major Cordell, disarmed, caught, finished, looked at her, and something in his face broke. And what came out was not the cold calculation of a villain, but the exhausted confession of a man who had been carrying something too heavy for too long. You want a reason that makes it make sense, Cordell said. There isn't one, there's never one. It starts small. It always starts small. A piece of information that doesn't seem to matter given to someone who seems like they're on our side for money that I told myself I needed, for reasons I told myself were good. And then it's a bigger piece. And then it's a route. And then it's a mission. And by the time you understand what you've become, you're so far in that the only way out is to make sure nobody ever finds out. And the only way to make sure nobody ever finds out is to make sure the people who could tell never come home. He looked down at the floor. I didn't decide to be this. I became it one small betrayal at a time until one night I was signing off on a mission plan and quietly making sure the enemy had all of it and telling myself it was the last time, it was always going to be the last time. His voice cracked. And then your spotter caught it. And your sniper wouldn't die. And now here we all are. Danny tried to warn them, Emily said. He sent it up the chain. It failed. Was that you? Did you stop the warning? Cordell was quiet for a long moment. Yes, he said. The intercepts he flagged came across my desk because everything comes across my desk. That's the whole point. That's why I was useful to them. I saw that he'd caught something, and I sat on it. I let it fail. I let you all walk into that valley knowing that a man on our own side had already tried to stop it. He looked up, and there were tears in his eyes now, and they did not make Emily feel any pity at all. I have to live with that. I let a good man's warning die on my desk. I let all of you walk into it anyway. You won't have to live with it long, Ryan said. You'll have plenty of time to think about it, but not out here, not around people you can hurt. He keyed his radio. This is Mitchell. I need military police to my location, the planning room off the communications corridor immediately. I have a detained officer and a matter for CID, and I need Colonel Sarah Whitfield at Regional patched to a secure line the moment she can be reached. Tell her it's Ryan Mitchell. Tell her it's urgent, and tell her it's the kind of thing she warned me about years ago. She'll understand. Cordell closed his eyes. It's over, Major, Ryan said. You planned a lot of funerals tonight. Every single body you ordered killed is still breathing. That's not luck. That's not a miracle. That's her. He nodded toward Emily. You were afraid of the wrong thing. You should never have been afraid of the sniper on the ridge. You should have been afraid of the person she was. Because a person like that doesn't die when you tell her to, and she doesn't leave anyone behind, and she doesn't stop. And she was always going to be standing right here in this hallway at the end of it looking you in the eye. The military police came and they took Major Cordell away, and the device went into the hands of Colonel Whitfield, who arrived in person before dawn and who listened to the whole story with a face that grew harder and colder with every sentence, and who promised Emily Carter and Ryan Mitchell that the thread they had pulled would be followed all the way to wherever it led, that everyone Cordell had touched, everyone in the network he had fed would be found and finished, and that they would not have to be the ones to do it, that they had done enough, that they had done more than enough. And then finally it was over, or the part of it that they could hold in their hands was over. Daniel Brooks lived. That was the thing Emily held on to in the days that followed, the thing that mattered more than the arrest, more than the investigation, more than any of it. Reyes had never left his side, and no one had been able to get near him who should not have, and the medics who could be trusted worked through the night, and Daniel Brooks lived. He would carry the wound for the rest of his life, and he would walk with a certain stiffness that would never quite go away. But he lived, and 3 days later, Emily sat beside his bed and held his hand the way she had held it on the mountain, except now there was no shooting, no enemy climbing toward them, no impossible choices left to make. You came back for me, Brooks said, twice. You left me on that mountain, and you came back for me twice. I told you I would. People say a lot of things when they're scared, and most of them don't mean it. I meant it, Emily said. I always meant it. You know that. Yeah, Brooks said, and he squeezed her hand. Yeah, I know that. I always knew that. That's why I stayed alive up there. Because I knew no matter what, no matter how bad it got, you were coming back. A man can hold on to almost anything if he knows somebody's coming back for him. In the weeks that followed, the story of what happened in that valley and on that mountain moved quietly through the places where such stories move, and it did not stay quiet for long, because it was too extraordinary to stay quiet. One soldier turning an entire ambush, one shooter unmaking a force of 31 women who refused again and again and again at every point where refusal cost her everything to leave a single person behind. Emily Carter did not want the attention. She said so plainly to anyone who would listen. She had not done it to be seen. She had done it because it needed doing, and she was the one who could do it, and those were two entirely different things, and she wished people would understand the difference. But there was one thing she agreed to, one thing she said yes to, and it surprised the people who thought they understood her. Months later, when the military asked her to help teach to bring what she knew to the soldiers who would come after her, she said yes, not because she wanted to be studied, not because she wanted her story told, but because of something she said to Ryan Mitchell the last time the two of them spoke about that night, standing outside on a quiet evening, a long way from any valley watching the light go down. "They keep asking me how I made those shots," Emily said. "The command, the instructors, the young ones, they want to know about the wind and the distance and the rifle. They want the technical answer. They want the thing they can write down and practice." She shook her head. "And I keep trying to tell them that's not the part that matters. Anybody with enough years and enough patience can learn to make the shot. That's just work. That's just time. The shot was never the hard part." "So what was?" Ryan asked. "If it wasn't the shooting, what was the hard part?" Emily was quiet for a moment. "The decision," she said. "That's the whole thing. That's the only thing. The hard part wasn't pulling the trigger. The hard part was deciding to. Lying on that ridge with Danny bleeding beside me, and my orders telling me to stay hidden, and every reasonable instinct in my body telling me to save myself. The hard part was deciding that 8 men I'd never met were worth my life, and then an hour later deciding it again, when the bird came for me and I sent it away. And then again on the mountain, going back for Danny in the wrong direction, into the enemy. The shooting was easy, Ryan. The shooting was just the thing my hands did after the hard part was already done." She looked at him. "That's what I want to teach them. Not how to make the shot, how to make the decision. Because you can train a person to hit a target from a mile away in the dark, but you can't train them to decide that someone else's life is worth more than their own. That part, they have to already have inside them or they don't. And the ones who have it, the ones who will make that decision when everything is screaming at them not to, those are the ones who change everything. Those are the ones who bring people home." Ryan Mitchell thought about that for a long time, and in the years that followed, long after he had left the service, long after the war had become something he mostly kept in a locked room, in the back of his mind, he found that it was the thing about that night he returned to most often. Not the ambush, not the fear, not the impossible shots, or the betrayal or the arrest in the corridor, but a tired woman standing in the fading light explaining that courage was not a talent but a choice, and that the choice was the whole of it, and that she had made it not because she was fearless, but because there were people who needed her, and walking away had never not once been something she was willing to do. He carried it with him. So did Cole, who stayed in the service and became the kind of soldier that younger soldiers looked up to and who told the story of the night. A sniper he'd never met saved his life. To everyone who would listen, not the technical version, the true version, the one about the decision. So did Daniel Brooks, who healed and who never stopped being Emily Carter's friend, who was there at every important day of the rest of her life, who stood beside her because she had stood beside him on a mountain when the whole world was trying to kill them both. So did the SEAL team, all 8 of them, who had walked into a valley expecting to die and walked out of it alive because someone on a distant ridge had decided they were worth saving. They all carried it. And when people asked them in the years that came after whether they believed one person could really make a difference, whether one soldier with one rifle could really change the outcome, when everything seemed already lost, they did not answer with an opinion. They answered with a name, Emily Carter, because she had proven it. Not once, not with a single lucky shot, but over and over across the worst night of all their lives, at every moment where it would have been easier and safer and entirely forgivable to save herself and let others fall. She had lain quiet on a ridge while men who outnumbered her celebrated a victory they had not yet won, and she had waited and she had chosen. And then when the moment came, she had taken the shot. And the shot had changed everything. But the shot was never really the point. The choice to take it was. The decision made alone in the dark with everything to lose, that nobody depending on her was going to be left behind. Not the strangers in the valley, not the friend on the mountain, not a single soul she had the power to save. Emily Carter was not the loudest person on that battlefield. She was not the largest force or the heaviest weapon. She was one woman lying quietly in the distance, waiting for the moment when one perfect decision could save everyone. And when that moment came, she did not hesitate, and she did not flinch, and she did not walk away. She took the shot, and every one of them came home.